What happens when an unstoppable force of political conviction forged in the streets of the Bronx collides with the polished, immovable object of late-night television? What happens when the carefully constructed world of celebrity interviews and easy laughter is shattered by a truth so raw and so potent that it can't be edited out or laughed away? You get the night that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't just appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live, she fundamentally broke it. This isn't the story of a simple interview. This is the story of a televised duel, a moment where the curtain was pulled back, revealing the vast chasm between Hollywood glamour and American reality. Our story unfolds not in the hallowed halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., but thousands of miles away under the glittering artificial lights of Hollywood, California. The protagonist, or perhaps the target, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, better known as AOC. A political phenomenon, the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. She was a figure who evoked powerful emotions. To her supporters, she was a warrior, a fearless voice for the working class, a progressive firebrand, unafraid to challenge the establishment. To her detractors, she was a radical, a socialist naïf out of her depth. But to everyone, she was a force of nature, a brilliant communicator who had mastered the language of the digital age. Our second character, the one who would unwittingly light the fuse, is Jimmy Kimmel, the affable, universally recognized king of his late-night kingdom. For over 2 decades, he had been a comforting presence in American homes, a master of the monologue, the witty jab, and the celebrity-friendly banter. His show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, broadcast from the historic El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, was a well-oiled machine, designed for comfort, predictability, and above all, entertainment. Politicians were frequent guests, but their appearances followed a familiar script. A few self-deprecating jokes, a light ribbing about their opponents, a softball question about a non-controversial policy, and a clean cut to a commercial break. Kimmel was the ringmaster, and everyone who sat on his couch knew the rules. On this particular evening, however, one of his guests had brought a different rule book. The air in Los Angeles that day was thick with a strange, almost surreal blend of anxieties. It was a period where the nation was grappling with the dizzying aftershocks of a global pandemic. The economy was a teetering Jenga tower of inflation, supply chain disruptions, and profound gut-wrenching inequality. The nightly news was a relentless barrage of statistics that felt both abstract and deeply personal: the soaring price of gasoline, the impossible cost of housing, the political polarization that seemed to poison every conversation. Yet, inside the insulated cocoon of the El Capitan Theater, the atmosphere was deliberately, almost aggressively cheerful. The studio audience, flown in from all corners of the country for a vacation, was buzzing with an electric anticipation, ready to be entertained, ready to escape the very anxieties AOC had come to discuss. Backstage, the two worlds were a study in contrasts. Jimmy Kimmel was in his element. He stood in his meticulously tailored suit, reviewing his blue cue cards with his writers. The mood was light, confident. He'd done this 1,000 times. The pre-interview notes would have described AOC as fiery and popular on social media. For Kimmel, this was a content opportunity. He likely envisioned a segment that would generate some viral clips. Maybe he could get her to do a funny TikTok dance or playfully quiz her on obscure congressional rules. He saw her not as a legislator representing 700,000 souls, but as a popular, slightly controversial figure who would boost ratings. His goal for the next 12 minutes was to be charming, to be funny, and to keep the show moving. His mindset was that of a host: maintain control, keep it light, sell the product. Just a few yards away, in a sterile green room, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was preparing in a different way. She wasn't cracking jokes with a retinue of writers. She was likely on her phone, but not for leisure. She was scrolling through comments, reading messages from constituents, absorbing the daily realities of the people she fought for. A message about a mother who couldn't afford her child's asthma medication. A tweet from a student drowning in loan debt. A plea from a family facing eviction. For her, the 2,000-mile journey from her district in the Bronx and Queens to this Hollywood studio wasn't a celebrity jaunt. It was an away mission. She was stepping into the lion's den, a territory governed by different values, a place where the struggles of her community were often reduced to fodder for punchlines. She knew the game. She knew that to the machine of late-night television, she was an exotic creature to be observed. Her mindset was that of a soldier on foreign soil: be prepared, stay on message, and never ever forget who you are fighting for. As the stage manager's voice crackled over the speaker calling her to the stage, she wasn't thinking about being liked. She was thinking about being heard. The show began with its signature high-energy fanfare. The house band, vibrant and loud, played Kimmel onto the stage. The monologue hit all the expected notes, jokes about the president, jabs at celebrities, a funny bit involving his sidekick, Guillermo. The audience roared with laughter, perfectly conditioned. Then came the moment. "Our first guest tonight," Kimmel announced with a broad smile, "is a congresswoman from New York, a powerful voice in Washington. Please welcome the Honorable Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez." The applause was enthusiastic, though perhaps a bit more varied than for a movie star. AOC walked out smiling, waving, and settled into the plush armchair opposite Kimmel's desk. The initial exchange was textbook late night. Kimmel started with some light, disarming banter. "Welcome to Hollywood. It's a little different from the house floor, right? Less shouting, better snacks." AOC played along her smile, genuine, but her eyes watchful. "The snacks are definitely an improvement," she quipped, "but you'd be surprised about the shouting." They talked about her social media presence, her meteoric rise in politics. Everything was cordial, safe, and utterly predictable. The audience was relaxed. Kimmel felt he had the interview exactly where he wanted it. And then he made his move. He decided it was time to pivot to policy, but through the lens of comedy. He saw an opening to make a relatable, everyman joke about the economy, a topic dominating the headlines. He leaned forward, a conspiratorial grin on his face. "You know, with this inflation, it's just getting crazy. I was at the grocery store. My wife was at the grocery store," he said, correcting himself with a wink to the audience. "And a single bag of that organic, gluten-free quinoa costs like $15. Now $15. Is that part of the Green New Deal I didn't read about?" He delivered the line with practiced timing, leaning back, expecting a wave of laughter from the audience and a playful groan from his guest. He got the laughter, a nervous, scattered titter from the crowd. But from AOC, he got silence. Her smile didn't just fade, it vanished, replaced by an expression of profound, almost clinical seriousness. She didn't groan, she didn't chuckle politely. She simply stared at him, letting his punchline hang in the air until it curdled and died. The silence stretched for a beat, then two. The energy in the room shifted instantly. It was as if someone had thrown a switch, plunging the carnival-like atmosphere into the cold, stark light of an operating room. Finally, she leaned into her microphone, her voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight that cut through the studio. "Jimmy," she began, her tone devoid of malice, but sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "Do you mind if I ask how many of your viewers tonight have ever worried about the price of quinoa?" The question hung in the air, a stunning and direct challenge, not just to the joke, but to the entire premise of the conversation. Kimmel, a master of controlling the rhythm of a show, was visibly thrown off beat. The audience's nervous laughter died in their throats. He tried to recover, to paddle back to the safe, shallow waters of comedy. "Oh, well, it's just a joke, Congresswoman. Just trying to point out how everything's getting so expensive." His casual charm was starting to look like flustered defensiveness. This was the opening AOC was waiting for. She wasn't going to let him off the hook. "I understand you think it's a joke," she replied, her voice still level, her gaze unwavering. "But for millions of Americans, the price of food isn't a punchline. It's a daily source of anxiety. We're not talking about organic quinoa, Jimmy. We're talking about the price of milk, of bread, of baby formula. Things that people in my district have to decide if they can afford after they've paid their rent, if they can even afford their rent." In the span of 30 seconds, she had completely reframed the exchange. This was no longer a light-hearted chat about inflation. It was a searing lecture on class privilege and the profound disconnect between the world represented on his stage and the world that existed just outside the studio doors. The camera cut to Kimmel. His smile was gone, replaced by a tight, strained expression. He was a fish out of water flopping on the deck of his own ship. He tried to steer the conversation back to regain control. "Right, no, of course, those are the serious issues, and we all care about them. But, this is a late-night show. We're trying to bring a little levity." Her counter was immediate and devastating. Why does discussing the financial struggles of American families have to be relegated to C-SPAN? Why can't it be a conversation we have right here on a platform that reaches millions of people who might not be watching cable news? Is their reality not entertaining enough for your audience? Each question was a precision strike, dismantling the unspoken rules of his genre. She was refusing to be the fun politician. She was using his multi-million-dollar platform to force a conversation he was clearly unprepared to have. The tension was no longer a subtext, it was the entire text. The rising action wasn't just a disagreement, it was a hostile takeover of the narrative. This was the moment the show broke. The carefully constructed artifice of Jimmy Kimmel Live was cracking under the weight of AOC's relentless, focused sincerity. Kimmel, now visibly sweating under the hot studio lights, was completely cornered. His cue cards were useless. His stable of pre-planned jokes was irrelevant. He had lost control of his own show in front of millions of viewers, and his opponent hadn't even raised her voice. The audience was utterly silent, captivated. They weren't watching a comedy show anymore. They were witnessing a public dissection. The band sat frozen instruments in their laps. Producers in the control booth were likely screaming into their headsets, but there was nothing to be done. The segment was live and it was spiraling. In a last, desperate attempt to reclaim his authority, Kimmel fell back on the oldest tool of the powerful when challenged condescension. He forced a paternalistic smile and said, Okay, Congresswoman, I get it. You're very passionate, and we admire your passion. But we do have to take a commercial break in a minute, and I was hoping we could talk about something a little lighter, maybe your favorite movie. He was trying to put her back in her box, to treat her like a difficult child who needed to be redirected. It was a fatal miscalculation. This was the opening for the final, decisive blow. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned forward, not with aggression, but with the calm, terrifying certainty of someone who knew they held all the cards. She looked directly into the camera, bypassing Kimmel entirely and speaking to the nation. A commercial break, she said, letting the words sink in. That's a good time to talk about something, because those commercials, the ones that pay for this beautiful set, this band, all of this, they're selling things. Cars people can't afford the gas for, medications whose prices are skyrocketing, mortgages for homes that are out of reach for an entire generation. She then turned her gaze back to Kimmel, her eyes locking onto his. The studio felt like a vacuum. So, with all due respect, Jimmy, the fun you're trying to have tonight is subsidized by the very economic system that is crushing the people I represent. Their struggle is not an inconvenient truth. We have to pause for a commercial. It is the single most important story in this country. And my job, whether I'm in a hearing room in Washington or sitting on this very expensive couch in Hollywood, is not to provide you with a lighter segment. It's to demand that we confront that story. So, no, I don't want to talk about my favorite movie. I want to talk about why a parent in my district has to choose between buying insulin and paying their electricity bill. Do you have a joke for that one? It was a rhetorical kill shot. There was no comeback. The question wasn't a question. It was a verdict. It exposed the entire premise of his show, and perhaps the entire genre of celebrity-driven media, as a trivial, out-of-touch distraction. The affable host was revealed to be just a man stripped of his power, left speechless and exposed on his own stage. The camera zoomed in on his face, blank and stunned, then cut to hers, calm and resolute. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely and irrevocably inverted. In that moment, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had done the impossible. She had canceled Jimmy Kimmel's show, not by protest or by petition, but by replacing his fiction with her reality. The director, seeing the wreckage, finally yelled the only thing he could, "Cut to commercial." The screen abruptly went black. The transition to a brightly colored car commercial was jarring a violent lurch back into the world of manufactured happiness. But inside the El Capitan Theater, the silence was deafening. During the 3-minute break, a palpable tension filled the air. A flustered producer with a headset rushed to Kimmel's desk, whispering urgently. Kimmel just nodded, his face pale, avoiding eye contact with his guest. AOC, meanwhile, sat perfectly still. She took a sip of water, her composure unbreached. She hadn't been angry or emotional. She had been precise, tactical, and utterly effective. She hadn't come for a fight, but she had come prepared for one, and she had won. When the show returned, it was as if the audience was watching a different program entirely. The energy was gone, replaced by a cold, formal courtesy. Kimmel, looking shaken, read his remaining questions from the cue cards in a near monotone. He asked a perfunctory question about a piece of legislation which she answered clearly and concisely. There were no more jokes, There was no more banter. The final minutes of the interview limped to a close, and Kimmel thanked her with a brevity that bordered on dismissal before quickly introducing the next guest, a comedian who now faced the impossible task of making a silent, shell-shocked audience laugh. The damage was done. The moment the show ended, the internet erupted. The clip of the exchange went viral on a scale that dwarfed anything else from the show that year. The hashtag AOC cancels Kimmel was trending within the hour. The fallout was swift and brutal, cleaving public opinion right down the usual party lines. Conservative media outlets ran segments accusing AOC of being a humorless, disrespectful ideologue who attacked a beloved American host. They painted her as an extremist who couldn't take a joke, completely missing the point that the joke itself was the problem. Progressive channels and online commentators, however, hailed her as a hero. They saw the exchange as a masterclass in speaking truth to power, a legendary moment where a politician refused to be a pawn in the media's game. They praised her for using a massive platform to highlight the very real disconnect between the media elite and the lived experiences of ordinary people. Pundits on all sides analyzed the clip for days, dissecting every word, every facial expression. It became a cultural Rorschach test. Did you see an arrogant politician or a courageous advocate, a flustered host, or a symbol of out-of-touch privilege? The message, however, transcended the political spin. The real lesson from that night wasn't just about AOC's debating skills or Kimmel's misstep. It was a profound statement on the nature of power and communication in the 21st century. It proved that authenticity, when wielded with intelligence and purpose, can be more powerful than the most expensive production budget. AOC demonstrated that you don't have to play by the established rules when those rules are designed to silence the very reality you represent. She didn't win by outshouting her opponent. She won by outclassing him by holding up a mirror and forcing him and his audience to see the uncomfortable truth reflected in it. The resolution wasn't an apology or a rematch. It was the permanent sear of that moment into the cultural consciousness, a lesson that a politician's greatest weapon isn't a policy paper, but an unshakable connection to the people they serve. So what do we take away from this monumental clash of worlds? This was more than just a viral moment. It was a lesson in strategy, power, and purpose. It forces us to ask some fundamental questions. Was Jimmy Kimmel simply doing his job as an entertainer, trying to keep his show light in difficult times? Or did he cross a line by trivializing the real struggles of millions? Was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez being an effective and powerful advocate for her constituents, or was she a humorless politician who couldn't adapt to the environment she was in, who was truly right in that exchange? There's no easy answer, and the debate that raged online for weeks proves just that. Let us know your unfiltered thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think won this showdown, and why your perspective is a crucial part of this conversation? If this deep dive analysis gave you a new perspective on this historic television moment, do us a favor and hit that like button. Share this story with someone you think needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more content that dares to go beyond the headlines. The ultimate lesson from that night is a powerful one that applies far beyond politics. It teaches us that your platform, whatever it may be, is a tool. The person who wields that tool with a clearer sense of purpose, a deeper conviction, and a more authentic connection to their message will almost always have the upper hand. AOC didn't just win an argument. She gave a masterclass in how to walk into a hostile environment and turn it into your home field advantage, and that is a lesson worth remembering.